The attic smelled of mothballs and wet cedar. Eleanor Marsh lifted the Kodak Duaflex from its velvet-lined case. The shutter clicked. A pale flash bloomed in the darkness. When the Polaroid developed, it showed a man she had never met yet. His face matched every photograph in her late husband's study. The date stamp read the 3rd of November, 1987. Harold Marsh had been dead for 31 years. In 1956, Harold Marsh was a portrait photographer operating out of Cedar Falls, Iowa. His specialty was family portraits shot on large-format 8x10 glass plates. Neighbors described him as meticulous, solitary, married to his work. His wife Eleanor inherited the studio upon his death from a heart attack that November. She sealed the building and did not return for 3 decades. When she finally opened the studio in 1987 to sell the property, she found the camera waiting for her, loaded, focused, aimed at an empty chair. The first photograph Eleanor developed that day showed Harold seated in his own studio chair. He wore the same grey cardigan from his last known portrait. His hands rested on the armrests. His eyes stared directly into the lens. The composition was identical to a photograph Eleanor had framed above the fireplace in 1957, the last portrait her husband ever took. The new photograph bore no signature, no metadata, no explanation. The film box listed its manufacturer as a Kodak plant that had closed in 1974. Eleanor contacted the Cedar Falls Police Department on the 5th of November 1987. Officer Dennis Holtze responded to a complaint of disturbing photographs. He examined 7 additional images taken over the following week. Each showed Harold in a different pose, standing by the window, seated at his desk, adjusting a light reflector. The timestamps on the photographs ranged from 1954 to 1956. Officer Holtze noted in his report that the photographs exhibited no evidence of recent development, yet contained unusually high silver content consistent with 1950s photographic chemistry. The camera had not been fired since 1956. The film had not been replaced. Yet the images kept coming. The Cedar Falls Historical Society became involved in January 1988. Dr. Raymond Vance, a photographic conservator from Des Moines, analyzed the original negatives stored in Harold's studio. He confirmed the glass plates were authentic 1950s products manufactured in Rochester, New York. The silver gelatin emulsion showed standard aging patterns consistent with their supposed age. Yet when Dr. Vance examined the newer photographs, the ones taken in 1987, he found no anomalies. They were technically perfect. They appeared to have been exposed through Harold's own lens, on his own camera, by his own hands. Dr. Vance wrote in his final report, "The photographs present an inexplicable continuity of technique and equipment that should be physically impossible." In 1994, Eleanor Marsh donated the camera to the Cedar Falls Heritage Museum. For 17 years, it remained in a climate-controlled display case. Security cameras recorded nothing unusual. Yet the museum received 11 anonymous letters between 1995 and 2011, each containing a new photograph of Harold Marsh. The envelopes bore no postmarks. The stamps were unissued. The handwriting was never analyzed. The final anonymous letter arrived on the 3rd of November 2011, the 55th anniversary of Harold's death. It contained a photograph of Eleanor herself, seated in the studio, holding the camera. The photograph was dated October 2011. Eleanor died 3 weeks later. Skeptics have proposed 3 explanations over the years. First, elaborate hoax. Someone with access to vintage equipment and period, accurate chemistry could theoretically reproduce the photographs. However, no suspect has been identified, no motive established, and the 1995 to 2011 anonymous letters remain unexplained. Second, misidentification. Perhaps the figure in the photographs is not Harold Marsh at all, but a relative with similar bone structure. DNA analysis of the original 1,956 negatives was inconclusive due to emulsion degradation. Third, confabulation. Eleanor Marsh, grieving and elderly, may have experienced retrospective hallucination compounded by familiar surroundings. Yet this theory fails to account for Officer Holtze's contemporaneous report or Dr. Vance's chemical analysis. 2 details have received insufficient attention. First, the composition of the 1,987 photographs contains subtle differences from the original portraits, a book on the desk that was not present in 1956, a crack in the window that matches damage documented in 1962, a calendar visible on the wall showing March 1958. The photographs appear to show Harold's studio not as it existed in 1956, but as it evolved over time after his death, as if he were documenting his own absence. Second, the camera itself was never serviced after 1956. No one replaced the bellows, cleaned the lens, or adjusted the focus. Yet the 1,987 photographs are technically superior to the original portraits, sharper, better exposed, more precisely composed. Whoever or whatever was operating the camera grew more skilled over 30 years of inactivity. What if Harold Marsh never fully departed? Photography has always occupied a strange space between art and relic. Early photographers believed the camera captured something of the subject's soul, a belief that gave rise to spiritualist photography in the Victorian era. Harold spent 40 years pointing lenses at faces, freezing light into memory. What if, in that obsessive repetition, he encoded something of himself into his equipment? Not a ghost in the supernatural sense, but an imprint, a pattern of intention and attention so deeply embedded that the camera continued its work without its operator. The Duaflex was not haunted. It was devoted. The Kodak Duaflex IV remains in a private collection today. Its current owner, who requested anonymity, reports that the camera still produces images on rare occasions, photographs of empty rooms, of closed doors, of landscapes that match locations in Harold Marsh's known portfolio. The owner has documented 11 such images since 2018. None have been published, none have been verified. The Cedar Falls studio was demolished in 2001. Eleanor Marsh's house was sold. Harold's original glass plate negatives are stored at the State Historical Society of Iowa. They have never been re-examined. Open question. If a camera can remember its operator for 30 years, what else might be waiting in the objects we leave behind? Next on Phantom Atlas. The lighthouse that broadcasted an SOS signal 3 years after it was decommissioned. When the Cape Hatteras light went dark in 1948, no one expected it to call for help again. Until someone answered.